And I'm going to turn off everyone's mics. And I'm going to share, which I think is a correct opening. There we go. Finley's title was much longer than that, but since I've only recreated this slide in the last few minutes, I didn't get the full title. Welcome to the Third Wednesday Vesper service, sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council, for short UMIAC. Tonight the preacher is the Reverend Dr. Finley C. Fatha Campbell, the founder and chair emeritus of UMIAC. His sermon title is much longer than that, but that's the important part. I may not get there with you, a kind of reflection of something that Martin Luther King said. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our preacher. He went to Morehouse College and got a bachelor's, and then to Atlanta University and got a master's and a PhD from the University of Chicago in 1969, focusing on socio-political themes in Anglo-American literature. He was an assistant professor at Morehouse College, Wabash College, and the University of Wisconsin at Madison, a senior professor at DeVry University, but has retired out of college teaching about 10 or 12 years ago. He taught courses in functional composition, Anglo-American literature, and Black studies. He's an ordained Baptist minister with a long career involving both Christian and UU congregations. He's also a self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninist historical theist, and he's retiring from UMIAC and from anti-racism activism at the end of this month. Let's see here. I have a few announcements. Our next service, the third Wednesday in January, our preacher will be the Reverend Craig Morrow, and his sermon title is Ugly Face. And I know it's a sermon that is somehow about Jesus. If you got the link for this service from that email address there, you'll automatically get one again next month unless you opt out. But if you were forwarded the link by someone, you may not be forwarded the link next month, so you might want to send an email. If you send an email to that address, you'll be added to the list. All of our services are on YouTube, and the quickest way to find them is to go to the UMIAC homepage, umiac.org, and just scroll down and down and down, and you'll come to a link for the third Wednesday services. I want to light a chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith, having sorrows and joys and needs and gifts. We like to speak of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and in celebration of the life we share together. Our opening hymn, Finley has retitled and I think rewritten the words of his hymns tonight. I think these are his words. The first hymn is called "O Freedom's One Foundation is Multiracial Unity," and I can't put the words on the screen. I think I'll be able to put the words of the second and third hymn on the screen, but I can't put that one on the screen. So Finley, you're on, but I'm sorry we can't even try to sing along with you.
Finley is muted.
Yeah, Finley, please unmute yourself.
This is based on one of my great Christian hymns. The original words are, "The church is one foundation." And some of you out of that tradition might know that great song. It really rings, but we need a new words because we are broad-based faith tradition here tonight. Oh, freedom's one foundation is multiracial unity. It is the power of struggle for bright equality, the secret strength of martyrs who died to set us free, the courage of our dreaming to fight for liberty. Elect of every nation and those selected too, our charter of liberation, one dream, one faith, one plan. We build the bright tomorrow for those in shadows blue. We build beloved community with our 7 principles imbued.
Thank you, Father Campbell. Is there more, or
No, that's it.
That's it. Thank you. This father business, I should explain. Universalists traditionally called senior beloved clergy father. Hosea Ballou was Father Ballou. John Murray was Father Murray. Thomas Whittemore was Father Whittemore. And Finley has become Father Campbell.
As in Father.
But he likes Father. Yeah. It is the mission of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council to carry out and foster anti-racist and multiracial unity activities, both within and outside the Unitarian Universalist Association, through education, bearing witness, and other actions, and expansion of our membership, both within and outside the walls of our congregations. We also seek to defend our UU principles against those who seek to undermine them. We envision our congregations, denomination, and society as not being color blind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating members of the world's rank and file by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their cultural heritage, and as treasuring diversity in the context of the beloved community. We call this vision multiracial Unitarian Universalism. This is the goal. This is the prize on which we try to keep our eyes. This is the mountaintop, the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world. Let's see. A participant has enabled closed captioning. Yes, well, okay, but I'd like to stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Excuse me. Finley, I think you have a reading now.
What the darkness of these dark nights look like. This is the mission and vision statement from a group called the Unitarian Universalist Advocacy Network of Illinois. This is what they say. This is what they fight for. The Unitarian Universalist Advocacy Network of Illinois commits to act in solidarity with activists, organizers, and the communities they represent as they fight for justice. So far, so good. We recognize the outrage and grief arising from a long history of senseless killings, lynchings, and violence. And now, the fallacy, a product of the dominant culture of white supremacy. We see you. You are our families, our friends, our neighbors. We are devastated and commit to hear your voices and follow your lead. follow your lead, even if you're being led to disaster? That closeth my reading.
And now another hymn, which I think I can put on the screen, actually. I'm going to try here. This may be it. No, that's not it. Pardon me while I fool around for a minute here.
I may have to go to the bathroom.
There we go. These are Finley's words to the second hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our Faith.
Okay, then here we go. A mighty fortress is our faith, the seven principles prevailing, our shelter in these stormy days, a bulwark never failing. Let goods and kindred go, this mortal life also, the body they may kill, God's truth abideth still. Her community will be forever. Amen.
Amen. And I think now it's time for your prayer and meditation.
Marxist-Leninist historical theism. What's that? I'm a Marxist because I believe that class struggle is the driving force of history. Oppressor versus oppressed. I'm a Leninist because I believe in the principle of democratic centralism. Debate, discuss, and once all of the debates and discuss are over, we work and fight as one, centralizing our efforts. I'm a historical theist because, like historical materialists, I believe that history is the operating energy of humankind, except I still believe that God reflects himself, herself within that historical reality. Tonight is the darkest night of the year, and we are celebrating in a few days the birthday of Yahshua, the Christ. But from a Marxist-Leninist perspective, we should really call him Yeshua, or Joshua the plebeian, the commoner, a part of the class struggle between plebeians and patricians to take control of the Roman Empire. On the 25th of December, three forces are coming to town. But right now, this darkest night of the year for millions of people around the world who live in the temperate zone, how dark it is indeed for our brothers and sisters in the darkened cities of Ukraine, in homeless camps in Los Angeles, in graveyards serving as refugee centers in the Philippines. And in this darkness, this darkest night of the year, three people are coming to town. Santa Claus is coming to town, bringing millions and millions of dollars in debt. Herod, the murderous king who will slaughter on the birthday of Jesus all the male children in Bethlehem, 2 years or younger, symbolizing the high mortality rates created by a capitalistic health system for children around the world. And yet, Mary and Joseph, seeking to find shelter for the birthing of their baby, they are coming to town. Baby Jesus, AKA Jesus, AKA Joshua, AKA the Emmanuel, as a featuring reality. This vision, like our chalice, shineth in this darkness, and the darkness has not yet overcome the light. But alas, the day, nor the light, the darkness yet. But, oh Lord, one day, this dark night will one day have an end. So may it be.
Our order of service says that now you would sing the hymn I just had you sing. My confusion here has caused us to do this out of order. So the next thing on the agenda, Finley, is your homily.
Brothers and sisters, everybody's having problems. I just finished this homily a few minutes ago. As I said earlier, I was working feverishly at my cardiologist to put together my notes. So if it's a little bit scattered, I would try to use my functional composition theory, Lemuel, to hold it all together. I may not get there with you. King's last words at this famous sermon. I may not get there with you, but we, he said, as a people, before that bullet was to strike him the next day, we as a people will get to the promised land. And there was a great uproar. I may not get there with you. I don't plan to be a Martin Luther King in his totality. I simply picked up the torch that he gave me, spiritually speaking, a night in April of 1968. The full title is this: I may not get there with you, but we as an organization will get to the promised land if we build nuclei. Are you listening, Monolith? Chapters. Are we listening, Eric? And fellowships. Are we listening, Beverly? Dedicated to multiracial Unitarian Universalism. Now, to control my feeling emotional tonight, I will put it into an expository outline. Roman numeral 1, introduction, A, background. Please bear with me, but tonight's service might be a little longer than usual, as this is my last homily as a racial justice activist. Beginning January 1st, 2023, hopefully before then, I just got a warning from my publisher. I better have that draft in by January 12th, or my contract is null and void. Hopefully by then, I return to my first love, writing, in the great tradition of didacticism. What's that? Literature that teaches, poems that tell you how to live, instruction with metaphor and simile, with narrative and exposition. The great tradition of didacticism, in my case, what I call neo-didacticism, was that writing to instruct in the great principles of social humanism, but shaped by my theological vision. And one of these writings, since a lot of people want me to do it, is to write my memoirs, the uncensored version, I guess. What is the purpose of all this? An autobiographical narrative reviewing my role in the anti-racist struggle as an activist, but not like any old activist, a builder of organizations, not a constructor of movements. I may have been involved in movements, but I never worked for them. I worked for organizations. My thesis is that sharing this narrative will give you some insights into your own commitment to the struggle against racism, what we call today, from the perspective of multiracial Unitarian Universalism, in terms of building an organization. Building an organization. Here's my blueprint. First, I'd like to touch briefly on my initial involvement, because people always want to know, how did you get How did you get involved in this? How did you get started? 1968 to 1973. That's the beginning of it. Then there's a second level of involvement, 1973 to 1993. And then my final level of involvement, 1994 to the present, as a Unitarian Universalist. Despite all my other isms, that's what I am fundamentally these days, a Unitarian Universalist, both together. And my struggles against the Afrocentric neo-racist cabal that started in 1994 in Dallas, Texas. And now tonight, I turn that struggle over to those of you who are willing to pick up the chalice, the chalices. Let us examine these points in detail. My initial involvement, 1968, 1973. April 4, 1968. And I hear cries in the street coming from my neighborhood on Fair Street at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. A cry arises, Reverend King has been killed. My apartment looks out over the street. I am dumbfounded. And then I see hundreds of students from the Atlanta University Center marching down the sidewalk. I call out, "What's going on?" And a Morehouse student cries back, "We're going to a rally to protest the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. You coming?" You coming? And I do. In my memoirs, I'll give more details. But right now, let me jump to the main thing that triggers me. I go over to on the 7th of April, I believe it is, I go over to the wake. People are lined up, black and white together. Black and white together. I read in a history of the UUA that when King was killed, these neo-racists had a separate ceremony. The white ministers went to one place and the black ministers went to another place. When I read that, I couldn't believe it. Well, the day of that wake, we're lined up black and white. It was at that time, there was the binary. Spelman Chapel is a huge place. It's called Sisters Chapel, huge. All lined up. And he's a very small looking guy. He always seems so tall in television. And I'm coming back out of that moment. I'm filled with both grief and shame because I had opposed him. I thought he was playing into the hands of the communists when he came out against the war. I thought he was wasting his time dealing with sanitation workers when we're supposed to be building up the black middle class. And my goodness, this idea of the poor people's campaign seemed to be ridiculous. Let the poor take care of the poor. The poor you'll always have with you. I wrote about these words in article after article condemning him. So here I am. Shame and grief. A.B. Spellman, Professor A.B. Spellman, the head of the Black Power movement, comes out of the chapel. He'd gone in there, came out and had a kind of sardonic grin on his face. And he said, "Well, that's over with. Now we can take over." And I can imagine him saying, and I can't recreate it all because I don't want to do that tonight. Just kind of give you the emotional background. Something to the effect of, "And we're going to make sure that no hunkies come to the funeral." I said, caught off guard, "We'll see." And we saw. And that's when I discovered it is not enough to feel grief. It is not enough to feel shame or anger. You got to channel that into an organization. And so we set up the Black Action Committee. And thanks to our mobilization and in coordination with SCLC, white and Black citizens of Atlanta, despite a brief Black Power insurgency, burnt down a local grocery store that was serving the Black community. We made sure that the funeral service was biracial, and their attempts to prevent people from coming because of their race was defeated. My next organizing effort was with the Black Panther Party in the state of Indiana. My job, Lemuel Stigler will testify to that, was to build Black student unions and John Brown societies on white campuses in Indiana. Indiana, redneck territory, as I was once told. Indiana, Hoosier land. Indiana, you can't never get anything done in Indiana. Well, that was the job, to set up these Black student unions and John Brown societies on white campuses in Indiana. One of the results of our work was the establishment of the Malcolm X Institute of Black Studies at Wabash College in Crawfordsville, Indiana, as a multi-racially organic organization, not some separate thing sitting in a corner somewhere, not some Black house, but an organic part of the campus work, which exists even to this day. Here's some lessons that I want you to catch as I tell these narratives. The Black Power people said, no whites will come to the funeral. Whites came to the funeral. They said it would be impossible to organize Black student unions in North Manchester, Indiana, and Goshen, Indiana, and Franklin, Indiana, and we organized them. Hay Bag organized John Brown societies. That was for the white students, because at that time we still had the little racial stuff. You can't do that at St. Joseph's College at Rensselaer, Indiana, and we did it. And when some neo-racists came from Chicago to try to disrupt one of our conferences, we fought side by side and drove them out. After the success with the Black Student Union work, I was designated during my Indiana life as the white organizer. The white organizer, because we couldn't get any white radicals to organize white folks in the state of Indiana. They were scared of these rednecks. They didn't know how to talk to the farmers and the factory workers and the middle class ladies at the United Methodist Church, all concerned about how to deal with this race question. So I figured out the best way to do that was to create the Indiana Peace and Freedom Party. It was a part of the Rainbow Coalition that Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and Fred Hampton had called on us to do. In this project, again, the success, we estimate we reached thousands of people, Black and white. We even joined a national organization called the People's Party that had as their presidential candidate somebody that many of you don't know. His name was Benjamin Spock, ran for president with the People's Party, Black-white unity. We accomplished a major goal. First of all, we involved thousands of white and many Black Hoosiers in the anti-war movement. At the time when Nixon was pushing the moral majority, the silent majority, we reached out to that silent majority and won many, many of them to support the anti-war cause. But most of all, we protected the Indiana chapter of the Black Panther Party from police attacks. Read it in a book called Bitter Grain, about how Indiana chapter was the only one that did not suffer the kind of brutalizing raids kicked off by a guy named Ron Karenga back in 1968. That was the first level. I was getting my feet wet, but always the idea was grief and anger without organization is mere explosion, a form of egotism. Second level, 1973, 1993. I joined with an existing group already in play called the SDS, Students for Democratic Society. And I worked not with the Weathermen group, but the group called Worker Student Alliance. There may be some of them in the audience, and a group called Progressive Labor Party. They were incredible. They even came to Rensselaer, Indiana, to have an anti-Klan demonstration with our Black Student Union and John Brown Society. And we took over downtown Rensselaer. There was about 70 of us with a nice crowd of people giving us moral support. But the greatest success of the PLP-SDS combination took place in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, during this period of time, there was a very strong anti-busing movement. I think Richard Trudeau, you mentioned, knew a little bit about it. And this was an attempt to prevent busing with violence. There was a group called ROAR. Well, what to do about it? There's a picture that Brother Trudeau remembers where there's this guy with an American flag with a spear at the end of it, running down the road and stabbing in the back an NAACP lawyer. And nobody, and the police just standing there. So the PLP-SDS folks, with my moderate participation, we had something called Boston 75. And we organized young people around the country and workers and some professionals to go to Boston. Some stayed there for the whole summer, taking part in literally street fights with people with baseball bats from a place called Southie, or Southie, or Southie, an Irish neighborhood. What was the success we got out of that struggle? We, along with more and more progressive elements in the Boston ruling class, because some of them saw that this was not working, we smashed the leading anti-integration neo-racist organization in Boston called ROAR. And at the same time, indirectly, led to the liberation of the lower class Irish neighborhood, this Southie place, because it was controlled by the mafia, who were behind a lot of the racial violence that was going on, led by a guy named Bulger White, who turned out to be an FBI informant. He got killed recently in prison. There's a movie about it called Southie. Read it, see it. In that same period, 1973 to 1977, I became a part of a group which it doesn't resonate anymore, even to some people who may have taken part in it, called the National Academic Committee Against Racism, 1973, 1977. What was our job? There was a lot of academic racism emerging. Again, many we don't know anymore. Arthur Jensen, Shockley. By the way, there's an article in Science Magazine where we had attacked William Shockley way back then as a charlatan and a jive and just a racist. And the Science Magazine people, oh, no, he's a great Nobel laureate for finding the transistor. We can't attack him. Well, finally, I just read an article. They said, yeah, it's true. The editorial. He was a racist. And we should be ashamed of ourselves for not going after him. We did that way back then. We knew the guy was a charlatan. But his idea of the more white genes you have, the more intelligent you are. But anyway, we set up this academic group, this National Academic Committee Against Racism, called NACAR, with one specific task in mind: to prove the fraudulent nature of the theory that the lower class Black person was inherently inferior because he could not pass an IQ test. And the reason he could not pass an IQ test at the proper level was he had the wrong genes. He had the wrong genes. And our success was to thoroughly demolish that vision and to tear it apart by showing that some powerful scientist, quote and unquote, Sir Cyril Burt, faked his data. Dr. James Crow, that I debated at UW-Madison, couldn't tell me what a Black person was. After all that talk about Black people, this, Black, well, what's a Black person? I thought I'd get some kind of biogenetic critique. And all he could say, well, anybody can tell a Black person. I said, oh, you mean it's the melanin. Our intelligence is in our melanin. I said, okay. As a result of that battle, I got terminated, but at least he had to take a 1 year off because it was such a scandal. It was my involvement with the National Academic Committee that I discovered the concept of neo-racism and how to fight it. I met all kinds of brilliant guys in this struggle. Leon Kamen, Val Woodward, Toby Schwartz. What's that brother's name? Richard Lewontin. I mean, these were some big name people. And we out there debating and trying to figure out forming conferences and forums. And there was militancy too, storming the stage by some of our younger participants. But the smartest man of all these guys was the head of the Progressive Labor Party. His name was Milt Rosen. Self-educated brother, brilliant, a great Marxist-Leninist. He said, if you want to fight this racism fully, you got to show how the white worker and the white student and the white professional is also a victim of this anti-Black racism. So long as we keep them out of the loop, we will never successfully take this thing on. We'll be fighting round and round and round. And although our group called International Committee Against Racism sort of grasped that idea, they never really did it. They still got caught up in the black and brown phenomenon. And I try to raise these ideas where, well, Campbell, it's just too complicated to understand. Let's just stick with what is very clear. Like with that opening statement, the lynching of Black people, not the lynchings of white people. Not the lynching of white people. No, we can't tell. Let's take that off the table. It confuses people. Let's just stick with what is visible. And I never forgot it. To this day, his voice rings in my ears when we talk about how to fight racism. So that was that end of that. 1993, NCAR got eliminated, and that was that. Well, now what do I do with my life? My wife tricked me into joining First Unitarian Church of Chicago. She said, I'm not joining any Baptist church. She said, I'm not joining any Baptist church. She said, but there's a great church down the street. I used to go to it when I was a student, First Unitarian Church. She said, okay, we'll divide up. I'll go to the Unitarian Church from 10 to 11, then go down the street to the Baptist Church from 11 to 2 or 3 o'clock. The fight against racism inside of the UUA caught me by surprise. Dallas, Texas, 1994. I go there to learn more about Unitarian Universalism, and I learn about how all white people are racist. All white people are racist. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Unitarian Universalist. Her name was Barbara Majors, Reverend Barbara Majors. Turns out she wasn't really a Unitarian Universalist. She was a part of a group called Crossroads Ministry. And so I individualistically started attacking that theory. And, writing essays, doing articles, doing plays, trying to come up with different ways to raise this issue. But again, without an organization, there's no way to fight this kind of force. And so I joined a group called Racial Justice Task Force and dedicated our energies to fighting against the DRUUM, which stands for Diverse, Revolutionary, Unitarian Universalist, Multicultural Ministries, no whites allowed. And then another group called Allies for Racial Equity. There was a white group, there was a multicultural group, no white people allowed. And it was, for me, connected to racial segregation within the UUAC. We had only a small victory against this tremendous force. I never thought we'd get this strong. I really didn't. But back then, we had a little modest victory. We prevented the rise of neo-racist groups at our church. They wanted to set up an all-Black group at the church. We said, no, you can't do that. Not that you can explain why you need to do so. And so this group decided not to form it at the church. But then I began to see as the anti-integration forces were getting stronger and stronger, we needed a national organization. And so with the help of some good friends like Alan Lindrup and my wife and others, Bobby Campbell, that's her name, we formed the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Caucus. And we were working within the framework at that time of the fourth principle that was applied to different organizations in the UUAC. You could have DRUM, you could have ARE, and you could have UBIAC. We were caucus at the time. Mainly educational work, tables, dances, parties, forums. At the regional meetings and at the general meeting, there we were. Our greatest success as a caucus was working with opponents of anti-immigrant racism in Arizona to have the General Assembly there. Now, you would think that that would be a perfect place to show the unity of UMIAC and DRUM and ARE and our forces out there in Arizona in a common struggle against anti-immigrant racism. DRUM and ARE went after this proposal as if we were planning on going to Birmingham, Alabama in an effort to sabotage the project. But my modest voice as a Black guy speaking out for this thing and others who took part in that battle, we were able to have it there, provided that there'll be nothing else but a discussion of anti-immigrant racism, what we thought was going to be the plan. But we're dealing with people who are demonic. And as soon as we get out there, prepare for all of our anti-immigrant work, it had a wonderful, incredible, powerful demonstration at Tent City where they were housing these immigrant brothers and sisters. The board of trustees of the UUA, the Reverend Susan Gray, our president at the present time, and some Native American capitalist group came up with something called the Doctrine of Discovery nonsense and sabotaged our efforts to have an ongoing anti-immigrant racism struggle. But despite that, we did it. We had the demonstrations, we had the smaller meetings all over the place. And to show you how negative these people were, Reverend Morales refused to give interviews to the local press because he quoted, he didn't want to get involved with them. So we had to send a UMIAC person to talk to the local press about what we were there for. It was terrifyingly horrible. Well, here I am, ranting and raving. I've been honored to be named a chair emeritus of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council. And if I were to say anything about my journey, this is the high point. This is the high point. Well, it's the high point. It's not that I'm the emeritus, but that an organization still exists. Then I could be an emeritus. Because all the other organizations I created, they did their job and then they disappeared. But UMIAC is here. Look at us. We have these wonderful programs. We got a new board of directors. We've got a strong treasury. We have some money in the bank. We're trying to be a part of an international effort to revive historic Unitarian Universalism. We got a journal that comes out quarterly called The Arrow, named after the old arrow of my youth, an active website. And we got even a new logo being developed to replace the old NCAR logo. It's a picture of me and Alan Lindrup, one of the founders of all of this stuff, shaking hands together in the grand symbol. So I'm watching renovation, transformation of all the work that I have done. Being here with you all tonight is the symbol of what we have been trying to do. And it is wonderful. But we have a potential, not yet actual, a potential of becoming a major voice in the struggle against racism. Now listen to me, comrades. The abolitionist movement, remember that? Just a handful of people meeting in 1820 someplace. And by the time it was over, they had brought down slavery, built a whole new US American possibility. NAACP, 9 people walking barefoot at Harper's Ferry, back in the turn of the 20th century, lynchings and racist war going on all over the country, generated by the US American government. And the NAACP came from that. SNCC, a bunch of students decided to have sit-ins, get a hamburger. And by the time it was over, they had helped to overturn the horrors of Mississippi violence, 1964. Who says we cannot become like that? Except with this new vision. All of us now, to use King's great statement, all of God's children, black and non-black, white and non-white, Jew and non-Jew, all of God's children, or the human race's children, united in a single cause against this great force that keeps us so divided. And as we try to fight finger by finger, we don't need to worry about a white supremacy and whether who got lynched and how many got lynched back then. We're being lynched now. Black, brown, red, yellow, white. By coming together, we have the opportunity to transform the world. But if we build nuclei, 5 or 6 people getting together and say, hey, we want to build a nuclei. Chapters, 6 to 12 coming together, hey, we want to have a chapter. And wow, fellowships, a fellowship that is built upon multiracial Unitarian universalism, built on it. No rejection of it. We bring it in. Well, that's no longer my job. I've given you my work. I give you in your hands. I may not get there physically with you, General Assembly 2024. I got all these pills I'm taking, and some of them may do the work. And they say we can't promise you totally, but at least we got a fighting chance. And that's why I like fighting chances. But I'm not one of these people who hang around just gasping for air. I'm joining what they call final exit committee. I want a nice gentle go by. But I may not get there with you, but you will get there. And you will be me. 2024. Let's show them who we are. General Assembly 2024. There'll be no more compromises. No more trying to reach out to the nice ones in the Nazi party. We go there to say it's time, not that we will quit, but we will raise such a ruckus, you're going to throw us out because you can't stand the truth. Let goods and kindred go. There's mortal life also. The body they may kill. God or history or the great mysteries, truth abideth still. Her kingdom will be forever. We plan to build an organization, not a movement. Pray that we can do this work as God or history so will. We still have a world to win. Amen.
Amen. We don't pass the plate, but we push a little for members. We exist to fight racism within the Unitarian Universalist Association and outside, to fight it in a way that works, a way that's based on facts, not this sort of hysterical statement by Al Sharpton and people like him that, oh, racism is just as bad as it ever was. It's just gone underground. Well, no, there's been a lot of progress in 75 years. We're going to talk about facts. The Unitarian Universalist Association is infested with white supremacy culture. Well, no, that's nonsense, and it's not helpful. It's in fact racist in an anti-white way, and if you look into it, it's racist, more importantly, in an anti-black and brown way. We want to promote multiracial unity within our congregations and beyond. That's why we exist. We'd like you to consider joining us or supporting us. And now, Father Campbell has some last words.
This I will read without drama. There is one arena where I will be active, and that is my opposition against racist imperialist war, particularly World War III. A prayer for peace, the need for détente between the 3 great nuclear superpowers, the white horseman, the red horseman, and the black horseman, of the book of Revolution, called the Book of Revelation, which if they fail, then comes the pale horse and hell. I'm referring to the United States of America, People's Republic of China, and the Russian Federation. And yet, through the power of the negation, a better world shall emerge, as prophesied in the three great monotheistic religions, emerging from the wilderness of fire and blood and freezing nights. So may it be. I have one last hymn, I think.
Now I'm trying to show the words of your last hymn. Have I succeeded?
Yes.
Arise, ye prisoners of oppression.
This is borrowed from the Internationale of Eugene Poitiers, which was the great hymn of the great social humanist movements, the anarchists, the socialists, and the communists back in the 19th century. Arise, ye prisoners of oppression. Arise, ye people of the earth. For history thunders condemnation, a better world's in birth. No more the racist chain shall bind us. Arise, wage slaves, nor more enthralled. The earth shall rise on new foundations. We have been not, we shall be all. 'Tis the final conflict. Let each stand in their place. The multiracial rank and file shall be the human race. 'Tis the final conflict. Let all stand in their place. The international rank and file shall be the human race. So may it be.
You're a pretty good singer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should have heard me when I was younger. I had a sweet voice.
I like to end with the words of Theodore Parker, the Unitarian minister and heroic abolitionist. May ours be a religion that, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. And the chalice is extinguished. Father Campbell is happy to talk with you, but he would like to reduce it to 15 minutes. This man probably wants to go to bed now. So if this is the time we have an open discussion, but let's confine the first 15 minutes or so to questions or comments addressed to Father Campbell, and then he can get out of here if we choose to continue. And it's usual at this point to stop the recording because people are kind of leery about going on YouTube. So I'll stop the recording. Eric.
Hello?